China's communist power struggle is coming to a head as a major meeting of the Communist Party this month will determine the future of China. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. October 16th is the start of the 20th National Party Congress, the most important meeting of the Chinese Communist Party. Xi Jinping is expected to announce his plans to continue as head of the Communist Party and quote-unquote president of China. Of course, saying president is just meant to deceive people since there's no popular election in China. He's given himself lots of titles, but his highest title is General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. To get to this point, Xi had to spend years amassing tremendous personal power. He's been called the chairman of everything. In a decade, Xi Jinping's so-called anti-corruption campaign has purged 5 million officials, which is insane. That's an even higher body count purged than in any of the Purge movies. But if you've been watching this show, you know those purges weren't really about getting rid of corruption. They were part of a high-level power struggle within the Chinese Communist Party. Because as hard as Xi has been fighting, his enemies have been fighting as well. This is a life-or-death power struggle between Xi Jinping and a political faction tied to former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin. It's like a soap opera, really, which is why I've been covering it in what I call the people's favorite communist soap opera, General Hostility. By the way, to celebrate the upcoming Party Congress, we're offering, for a limited time only, this fantastic General Hostility t-shirt. You can get it over at chinauncensored.tv/merchandise and show your love for the people's favorite communist soap opera. Get yours today or be purged. The link is below. So today, to get you all prepared for the Party Congress, it's time for a recap episode of General Hostility. Think of it like one of those clip shows that happen before the season finale. So stay tuned, because I'm going through the whole history of the power struggle between Xi Jinping and Jiang Zemin, right after this quick commercial break. Welcome back. Unless you didn't see an ad, then this was probably demonetized. Now, it's time for a General Hostility recap. Previously on General Hostility, a life-or-death power struggle rages on between current Chinese leader Xi Jinping and former leader Jiang Zemin. But to understand it, we have to travel back in time to Mao Zedong, the great helmsman himself. Chairman Mao, the man who practically wrote the book on the art of the power struggle. That's how Mao seized control of the CCP in the first place. That, plus lots of purging. Mao plunged China into an era of chaos, with mass political movements, violence, and the complete destruction of the Chinese economy. But then Mao died, which could only mean one thing: another power struggle. Who came out on top? The one person no one expected, Deng Xiaoping. In a true General Hostility twist, Deng came back from the dead to dominate the CCP. Well, okay, he came back from being purged by Mao twice, which is arguably harder than coming back from the dead. Deng began a series of economic reforms in the 80s, called the Reform and Opening Up movement. Basically, all that meant was the Communist Party had wrecked the economy so badly, it had to back off a little bit and allow people to make money again, or risk total annihilation, like the Soviet Union. And as a nice little bonus, all the big money went to communist officials or their families. This was kind of like feeding the hungry by eating above them and letting them catch the crumbs. So there were economic reforms, but what about political reforms? This is Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang. They were known as Deng Xiaoping's left and right hands. They were in charge of implementing his economic reforms. But they were also interested in political reforms, or at least not opposed to political reforms, like more freedom of speech in the press. They also launched their very own anti-corruption campaign that even targeted the children of top-ranking officials. Hu Yaobang even apologized for the Communist Party's misrule of Tibet and pushed for greater autonomy. And if you're a fan of this channel, you already know how those political reforms worked out for them. I haven't been this sad watching a prequel since Star Wars Episode 1. Ugh. Let's just say there were some hardline Communist Party officials who didn't like Hu and Zhao's reformist ideas, which could only mean one thing: another power struggle. The hardliners eventually forced Hu Yaobang to retire, but he was really popular with the people. And when he died in April 1989, tens of thousands of students showed up to Tiananmen Square to mourn him. Those became the Tiananmen Square protests. And we all know how that ended. I haven't been this sad watching a prequel since Star Wars Episode 2. Double yuck. The Tiananmen Square massacre was the Communist Party saying there would be no political or social reform. Anyone who stood up to the party would get mowed down. But Deng Xiaoping had a problem. Party hardliners blamed the protest on Zhao Ziyang, and they made him spend the rest of his life under house arrest. Zhao was supposed to be Deng's successor. Deng needed to find someone else fast, someone who would continue his economic policies, but would appease the hardliners in the party and do no political reform whatsoever. And that man turned out to be Jiang Zemin, party secretary of Shanghai. Yeah, we finally get to him. General hostility has more background lore than the Silmarillion. When Jiang came to power, he was in a pretty weak position. Since he was from Shanghai, his power base in Beijing was quite small, which could only mean one thing: another power struggle. In fact, there was allegedly even a coup attempt against Jiang. Are you noticing a pattern yet? The Communist Party leaders have more drama over succession than the show Succession. And they don't even have Brian Cox to tie the whole thing together. Even Deng Xiaoping, who was still wielding real power, didn't really like Jiang. Remember, he never intended for Jiang Zemin to come to power in the first place. In fact, during his famous southern tour in 1992, he made thinly veiled criticisms of Jiang. And then, shortly after, declared that Hu Jintao would replace Jiang at the 2002 National People's Congress. Ooh, catty. Forget Succession, this feels more like the Real Housewives of Beijing. So how did Jiang go from this weak position to creating a political clique that would dominate China for more than a decade? General Hostility will be back after this quick commercial break. Welcome back to General Hostility. Jiang Zemin and his political clique have held an iron grip on China for more than a decade. But it poses a life-threatening obstacle to Xi Jinping's dreams of power. How did Jiang get so powerful? Well, by killing a lot of Falun Gong practitioners. Falun Gong is a spiritual movement that became popular in China during the 90s. By 1999, there were government estimates that up to 100 million people were practicing Falun Gong in China. That's more people than were in the Chinese Communist Party at the time. That made party hardliners nervous, and Jiang knew he could take advantage of this. For years, Jiang tried to go after Falun Gong. Persecuting a group to attain power for yourself? Why does that sound so familiar? Oh yeah, it was how Palpatine became emperor in Star Wars Episode 3. Triple yuck. But in April 1999, 10,000 Falun Gong practitioners showed up in Beijing to petition for an end to the harassment and the right to freely practice their beliefs. A large demonstration near Tiananmen Square, close to the 10th anniversary of the 1989 protests? The Communist Party freaked out, and Jiang was there to stoke the flames. He claimed Falun Gong posed a threat to the Communist Party and that its members had infiltrated all levels of the government. So Jiang said the only solution was to let him set up an extra-legal Gestapo that answered only to him or someone appointed by him. This was called the 610 Office, named because it was established on June 10th. Not very creative, I know, but still slightly better than calling it the Gestapo. Jiang and his people at the 610 Office dominated China's internal security apparatus. Within a few years, China was spending more on its internal police force than its military. I'm shocked they didn't choose this for their outfits. But Jiang had a problem. Just as his whole extra-legal police force thing was making him more powerful than ever, he had to step down as leader of the Communist Party, which could only mean one thing: another power struggle. When Jiang officially stepped down in 2002, he made sure he was still controlling everything behind the scenes. On paper, Hu Jintao was now the leader of the Communist Party, but Jiang made sure Hu had no power. In fact, Jiang was able to expand the 7-member Politburo Standing Committee to have 9 members, and everybody but Hu Jintao and his ally Wen Jiabao were working for Jiang. That's why, even though Jiang was officially retired, he was always front and center, right next to Hu, for any important meeting. In fact, it's widely believed Jiang even tried to assassinate Hu. It obviously failed. But then Xi Jinping came, and Jiang's iron grip finally broke, which could only mean one thing: another power struggle. Hu Jintao was supposed to have only 2 5-year terms. The question became who would replace him. Obviously, Jiang and his cronies wanted one of their own, and they chose this guy, Bo Xilai. The story of Bo Xilai is crazy, even for the Chinese Communist Party. It's something I could make a whole episode on. So here's the Cliff Notes version. Basically, Bo moved up the ranks by actively engaging in Jiang's persecution of Falun Gong. So much so, he was getting sued for it internationally. You know you're extreme when the international community looks at everything the CCP has done and thinks, that's all fine, but this guy has gone too far. You see, Jiang's persecution of Falun Gong was becoming a liability. Jiang promised the party he would wipe them out in 3 months. At this point, more than a decade later, he had totally failed. And in response to Jiang's actions, Falun Gong had become an international movement exposing Jiang and his cronies' crimes against humanity. In other words, making the party look bad. Hu Jintao and his only real ally, Premier Wen Jiabao, used this as an opportunity to fight back against Jiang's faction. According to a leaked U.S. Embassy cable, one successfully argued Bo's significant negative international exposure made him an inappropriate candidate to represent China at an even higher international level. Bo fought back, going so far as wiretapping Hu Jintao. But this basically gave an opening for Xi Jinping to come to power instead of Bo. Xi was a compromise candidate. Jiang didn't want Xi, but figured he could still get his own guys to control Xi the way he controlled Hu. Then Bo Xilai, with several other Jiang faction guys, tried to stage a coup against Xi. It all went wrong, and Hu Jintao was able to purge Bo Xilai to fight back against Jiang. It's too complicated to go into here, but it involves organ harvesting, the murder of a British businessman, Bo's right-hand guy making a midnight escape to the U.S. consulate dressed like a woman, and you know what, maybe I should make a separate episode about this. It's pretty wild even for general hostility. But the upshot is the coup attempt basically put Xi Jinping, the supposedly neutral compromise guy, on the warpath against the Jiang faction, which could only mean one thing: another power struggle. And turns out, Xi has a knack for power struggles. Bo Xilai is in jail now, along with those other 5 million officials. Xi Jinping shut down the 610 office. And over the years, he took control of each part of the Communist Party's military and police force by purging corrupt elements, slowly but surely dismantling the Jiang faction's grip. And now, Xi is on the cusp of breaking the Communist Party's 2-term leadership limit at the upcoming party congress. Will this give him the power he needs to finally break the Jiang faction once and for all and rule China with an even heavier iron fist? Find out next time on General Hostility. And now you're all caught up and ready for the Party Congress. It's scheduled for October 16th, so sit back, have some popcorn, wear your General Hostility t-shirt, and enjoy the show. And as I said, China Uncensored would not be possible without support from viewers like you, either by liking and subscribing, sharing the show with friends and family, buying an awesome t-shirt, or through direct support on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Those are the fans I call the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army, who join us in the fight against the Chinese Communist Party. As a thank you to them, I respond to their questions or comments. Today's comes from Sean Vikoren. It might be worth mentioning that a YouTube Prime membership gives you almost nothing. I switched to Patreon as soon as I was appraised. Great point, Sean. Yes, a lot of people ask me this. Does a YouTube Premium membership help us? Not really. It helps YouTube for sure, and you won't have to sit through ads, but YouTube barely gives us anything when a YouTube Premium member watches the show. I'm really not exaggerating when I say even $1 an episode on Patreon is so much more than we get from YouTube. If you'd like to support the show and can't afford $1 an episode, you can also choose how many episodes a month you'd like to support. So, Sean, thank you for your support, and thank you for watching. What do you think about the Communist Party's internal power struggles? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can, support China Uncensored on patreon.com/China Uncensored. The link is below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.